Hello and welcome to the Growth for Good podcast. I'm Drew Hendry and this series is all about shining a light on people who are building sustainable, ethical businesses that make a genuine difference in their communities. Growth for Good is rooted in a simple idea that businesses can and should be a force for positive change, whether that's through leadership, innovation, education or community impact. The organisations we speak to are proof that commercial success and social responsibility can go hand in hand. In this episode, I'm joined by Karen Simpson, founder of My Primary and Secondary Tutor and the Tutors Alliance Scotland. Karen began her career as a primary school teacher before stepping into entrepreneurship, building a tutoring business that now supports families across the UK and beyond. So we talk about the light bulb moments that drive teachers, the mindset shift away from the classroom to business owner, and why Karen is now working to raise standards across the entire tutoring sector in Scotland. So let's get into the conversation. Hello Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. You started as a primary school teacher. Tell me about how you got into that. Tell me a bit about Karen.
So I did my training in Edinburgh. I went to school in Inverness, secondary school in Inverness, and then moved down there and kind of always wanted to be a teacher. I remember being very young in a fancy dress, dressed as like a very old school headmistress with the mortarboard and the whole thing. And so yeah, I think I was naturally going to go down that route. And spent 4 wonderful years in Edinburgh, really enjoyed my training, came up north for my probation year and actually did that up in Caithness, where I'm originally from. And then eventually moved back down here. My partner, now husband, was teaching down here as well. So moved back to Inverness and taught in schools for up until about 2019, actually, on and off between having 2 children. So yeah, mostly as a class teacher, but for a wee part of that, I was in management, acting management for a little while as well. So really enjoyed most of that experience. And yeah, I mean, I still class myself as a teacher, even though I'm not in the classroom anymore.
So you turned that early childhood play into a career, because that was something obviously you enjoyed doing. When you found yourself being a school teacher and going through into the system, did you find it was just something you loved doing? What were your emotions at those times?
Yeah, it was interesting. My probation year was quite an experience. I was working in a very small rural school between Wick and Thurso, and at the time the school was having some renovation work done and the roof wasn't ready. It wasn't quite complete just before the school session was about to start. And as a brand new teacher, I was really excited to get going. And we had to move out. We had to evacuate the school in the first week and move to the local village hall. And I remember being so distressed. I couldn't put anything in the walls. I couldn't really start to live my teacher life that I really wanted to have. But that experience set me up for the future. And eventually I got my permanent post, which was down in Inverness. And I really enjoyed being a class teacher. I love the working with the children, obviously. I love seeing those light bulb moments when they really make a difference and when they get something, when they understand something, or when they feel so confident they can teach another child something that you've shown them. And I loved the teaching community. So I really felt part of that, not only in the school, but the wider teaching community when we would have inset days and get together with other schools. So I really enjoyed everything about teaching. But it's changed a lot, and eventually the part of that change caused me to then step out. I
want to ask you about your move to tutoring just now, but just to continue with your experiences as a teacher earlier on. I mean, it sounds pretty basic. You need 4 walls and a roof to get people taught for a start. But you were talking about those moments when you saw the reaction where the penny dropped with the children you were teaching. It must have also been kind of frustrating getting to those places. Was that early experience something that has formed what you've gone on to do next? And is that really what led you into tutoring as opposed to teaching? Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having those light bulb moments was becoming more challenging because the classroom was changing, because education was changing. And you go into teaching to make a difference. You want to feel like you're impacting on that child's life in a really positive way. And that was becoming more and more challenging to do that. I think with the change in the structure, the reduced support staff, more children with additional needs, lots of different factors fed into the fact that having those moments where you really felt you were making progress with children was becoming less and less, and that absolutely fed into me eventually leaving completely, because I was getting those moments in tuition. I was having different relationships with parents. It was lots of positive conversation and positive chats, and they were really valuing my time and the input, and that they could see the difference it was making for their child. Whereas in school, most of those conversations were usually if something wasn't going well, so it had that kind of negative undertone, even if it was about trying to improve outcomes for that child. So all of that, I think, as well as a few other things, personally as well, kind of led me to feel tuition was the right way for me to go.
And you talked about the children you were teaching having that light bulb moment. What was the light bulb moment for you that said you have to get into this new venture? And indeed, what led you to start up a business of My Primary and Secondary Tutor?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, that didn't necessarily happen because I wasn't getting the light bulb moments. I had a family, so in between having my children, I was asked to help a friend of mine who was a maths teacher do some tuition for her, and I actually really enjoyed it. And from that, I kind of set up my own thing because she was maths and I could help with English, and there was quite often inquiries for both. So I said, I think I might just set up my own page. So just created a Facebook page. It wasn't anything fancy. And it kind of grew from there. I was just doing a little bit of tuition in my house at my kitchen table. Eventually that wasn't a big enough space. So actually we built a summer house in the garden and that became my tuition space. And it grew again to taking on tutors and hiring classrooms in a local secondary school in Inverness, to eventually I enrolled in a course with HIE, which was called the Pathfinder course, which was about kind of whether you had a business or not. You might have had a business idea, maybe you're very well established, but it was like, how can you take your business forward? What are you trying to do to grow? And I knew there was a lot of children in the Highlands who didn't have access to this support, this tuition support, but wanted it. And I thought, I wonder if I could get my business online. I wonder if I could do some online tuition. And this was back around about 2017. And although there was probably some people tutoring online, no one that I knew. So I did the course. And through that, I realised that actually I could really grow this. I could maybe step out of the classroom. It was the first time I'd actually really considered it. And I continued for a whole nother year or two in school, and I grew it then to about 10 tutors, and a portion of those were online. And then just before COVID, it was kind of the October of 2018, I said, I think I'm going to step away. And so by January 2019, I was out of the classroom. And of course, by March, we were kind of COVID. So it all was meant to be, I think, because it was perfect timing.
You spoke about moving from, being a hands-on tutor, being somebody who was actually sitting with, your pupils and students, to running a business. That's quite an identity shift. What was that like for you? How did that feel as you were going through that process?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I'd always wanted to go into management when I was a class teacher. I knew eventually I would love to be running my own school or even beyond that. So the management side of things wasn't the challenge, I would say. But one of the challenges was that I'd stepped out of an environment where I felt like I had a lot of support and I had a network of teachers into somewhere that was quite alien. Where
you're on your own now.
I'm on my own. and I didn't really have, there wasn't many tutors, there wasn't other tutors. I mean, there was a very different setup, I think, in England. England had a really good network of tuition and lots of people were collaborating there and helping each other out. And so I tapped into that a little bit. But the climate there is different to Scotland. So in some ways, I still felt a little bit isolated. And I remember speaking to my neighbour actually, who ran her own business, and she said, you need to come along to some business networking. And I was like, well, why would I do that? is there other tutors going to be there? And she said, no, but you don't need other tutors to be there. The whole point is that running a business is the same challenges no matter what. And you'll build your network, you'll meet other people. And actually that was a huge turning point for me in actually accepting that I was running a business. I was a business owner and a boss, and I had other, people that was working with me, and that was amazing. So I joined a network, and I'm still part of that network, and I've had so much connection, but not just connection, it's the support when things are tough.
What were your emotions when you were going through that? What did you experience?
I felt quite lonely at times. It was quite lonely. I didn't really know who to talk to about what I was trying to manage, and the shift in mindset that I had to kind of make. Did you have to overcome some fears and insecurities, or were you? No, I wasn't. No, I would say
you're quite determined about it.
Yeah, I mean, by the time I actually decided to leave the classroom and run the business full time, I was making more money from the business than I was from my teaching job. So it wasn't a financial worry. There was no financial issues, I guess.
So this wasn't a risk. It was actually, like you've said, a mindset change. Yeah. Yeah,
for me, that was the biggest shift, I think, and really embracing and not feeling, not that I ever felt, what's the word? I didn't feel ashamed of leaving the teaching profession and moving into tuition. But anytime I spoke to certain people, there was a kind of barrier that was there, especially if it was someone that was still in the classroom. And that was really difficult to see that and feel that. So for a while, I kind of did really leave the teaching community quite a lot, and then I really stepped into the business network world when I made those connections. That was really important, and just feeling more confident to be able to say I am a teacher, I'm a tutor, I'm a business owner, and embrace that. That was a shift. That was a big shift.
So over 8 years, my primary and secondary tutor has been growing and expanding. You've been helping people all over the UK and internationally during that time. What has enabled that growth for you, both personally and professionally? What do you put that down to?
I think there was some good timing, I think, on my part. COVID made a massive difference to my business. Almost overnight, it grew from maybe 10 tutors to 25 tutors, and I'm always usually between 30 and 35 tutors now. And it wouldn't have happened because online education at that time really wasn't really there.
The wholesale switch to remote working that we saw during the pandemic actually benefited you.
Yeah, I was one of the few that was kind of glad of COVID for that purpose only, But even the way I operate my business, for those that were happy to do online tuition before, the process to get parents set up to work with me was really laborious. I had to explain in great detail how to do this and how to do this and how to do this. Now I simply send one email and they're all like, oh yeah, that's great, because we're so used to it now. So it was a mindset shift for everyone, and that really benefited me, especially parents now being like, yeah, online can work, we can see it can work, we want to use that, and we understand it ourselves, so we feel much more comfortable with our children doing online learning. So I do think COVID played a huge part in it. I also think perhaps me having the foresight to even look at moving into that space.
You do have to make your own luck in business.
Yeah.
And even though you found yourself in that environment, you were there to harness that and actually use it for the advantage of your business, yeah?
Yeah, I still think if COVID hadn't happened, we still would have seen, tech is always going to be growing, and AI and everything like that. We would have seen, I think, a shift towards online learning anyway. It just accelerated it a lot quicker, I think. So I do believe I would have still got my business to where it is now. It just might have taken me a little bit longer to do that. I do think you need to be always forward thinking. I'm always trying to think what next and keeping on top of things. And there's different ways you can take your business, obviously, and I've chosen to keep my business at a certain level because I want to do other things. If I was only investing my time, I think, in my primary and secondary tutor, I'm pretty sure I'd be growing it beyond what it is now, and I have ideas for that, but I have to manage it up with the other things that I'm working on too.
Karen, we've just been talking about the business, the moves, the emotions that you've run through. One of the things that I think that people will probably want to know is that you've built this. You've been a primary school teacher. You've been looking after people. You've been enabling people, and clearly there's a set of values behind that. What values drive you and your business now?
I think I really value having high standards. And when I moved into the tuition space, I moved from a class teacher into that space. And I always held myself to the same high standard that I did as a class teacher. And I hold that same standard for all the tutors that I work with. So I was kind of shocked when I realised that actually in tuition, you don't have to have any qualifications. There's no regulations around tuition.
None at all?
None at all. In fact, until April of last year, you didn't even require to have a PVG or be registered with Disclosure Scotland.
What's a PVG, just for those people who might not know?
Yeah, so it's being registered with Protecting Vulnerable Groups, essentially. So if for anyone that's working with children, usually they'd be registered with a PVG scheme, and that way they can be checked, that they don't have any criminal convictions or anything like that.
So there was nothing compelling you to have values attached to what you're doing. So what did you bring in terms of values?
Yeah, so all the tutors that I work with are fully qualified teachers. They have done their qualifications within the UK. They have they're a member of the PVG scheme or equivalent if they're based in England, DBS. They all complete in-house safeguarding training that we prepare, and they all know how they should be dealing with any disclosures or anything that come to light. And as an organisation, we're registered with the ICO, so we make sure that we're really careful with data and handling confidential information, etc. And to me, that should just be your minimum standard, And what was really frustrating when I hold that as a value, want to maintain high standards, is that I'm putting my business out there and advertising alongside other people who perhaps have none of those things. And, that began to frustrate me over a certain period of time, because you really feel like you're trying to do the best that you can.
So you're driven by high quality, high standards. Trust, I would imagine, is one of the values that's behind that as well. You're driven by all of this, seeing the frustration out there. How have you differentiated what you do from those other people who are not going to those levels or don't hold those values?
Yeah, I think so. Within my own tuition business, we operate in a way that's really transparent. Parents are very aware of the fact that all our teachers are fully qualified, and we make sure they know about the standards. But we do a lot of additional feedback for parents. We offer follow-up work and tasks for children. We do in-house assessments. We are aware of exactly where children should be and the ways in which we can help them to get there. A lot of the teachers and tutors that I work with do CPD over and above, and there's nothing to say that they have to do that. We have regular meetings where we talk about how we improve what we're doing for our pupils, for our families. And so the frustration for me is that that's not the case Scotland-wide. And the worry for me is that parents don't know that. So, there's a huge loophole there that if parents don't know that there's no regulations, really all the responsibility lies with them to ensure that if they do employ a tutor, that they meet all the expectations that they might expect them to have in terms of maybe being a fully qualified teacher or having a PVG, etc.
Well, a big theme, a central theme of Growth for Good is about ethical and sustainable business. You've taken some action, haven't you, to not only ensure that you're running an ethical and sustainable business, but it goes wider than that. Tell us about that. Yeah,
so most recently I've set up an organisation called Tutors Alliance Scotland. So we want to basically be the professional membership body for tutors in Scotland, and we want to hold tutors to these high standards, and we think tutors want to be held to those high standards, all the kind of things that I mentioned previously. But as well as that, we have a social purpose, so we're a not-for-profit organisation. We want to make tuition more equitable for pupils across Scotland. And at the moment, it really is about whether or not you can afford that additional help. We don't think that should be the case. So the plan is to create the Scottish Tutoring Framework. That framework will allow us to work more closely with schools and hopefully be able to access some funding to allow us to be able to support children.
So you're effectively helping to set up a body that will actually govern the work that you're doing. So that's quite unusual in business, where you're saying, look, I want some oversight here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, my dad was in business. He, you know, when I first kind of mentioned this, he was like, oh my goodness, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a bit here. But for me, it's about a legacy. It's about, well, what do I actually want to bring here? What do I want? What difference do I want to make? You know, and while I might not necessarily run my tuition business forever, this new project, this organisation that I want to create, I can see me being involved in that and for a very, very long time, and hope that this will be something that makes a real difference to reducing that attainment gap, to providing better outcomes for children, hopefully bringing more children out of poverty as a result for the future. And to me, that's really important. That's
and how is the development of that going?
Yeah, so at the moment we've been set up for almost a year. We are going to launch our membership on the 1st of March, which will only be for accredited tutors to begin with. We have a board of mostly educators, but we've also got people in business that are on that board, so they know what should be expected, etc. And they know what the climate is like. We also have tutor representatives that represent all the major cities across Scotland, and we want to really expand that into all 32 authorities, so that we can hear the tutor voice as well as, you know, as a board. And we hope to as well bring parents on board with us as well, and pupils. So we're reaching out to other places internationally. So we've contacted or been in touch with the Australian Tutors Association and the same body in America. So we're trying to really draw on lots of experience of other people that have done this internationally, what works well for them, and hopefully we can replicate some of that in Scotland.
Tuition can be sometimes judged or looked at kind of differently from in the education sector. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I felt that kind of pushback a lot of the time. Anytime I've gone into conversation with teachers around tuition, I think some of them view it as, if a parent has to reach out to get a tutor, does that look negatively upon them as a teacher or the school? And I don't see it like that at all. You know, what we offer in tuition is very different to what is offered in schools. And so we can't really compare them as such. I think when things work really well is when we have a partnership, which is what the Scottish Tutoring Framework hopes to create. Because, you know, ultimately at the moment we have got tutors that are supporting children with their education, and it is having a really positive impact. But more of that is coming through chance, if you like, as opposed to it being an absolute outcome. And, you know, parents at the moment sometimes are the middlemen in this situation. So the school might know that they're struggling and might contact the parent. The parent's like, I'm going to get a tutor. I'll contact the tutor. Can you contact the school? No, we can't contact the school. You can contact the school. You could ask them this, then pass it back. So it's just this constant kind of switching about, and that doesn't really work, you know, in theory.
You're hoping with the organisation that you're helping to build just now that miscommunication, that break in the chain actually is somehow managed better, and you can get a way to help the pupil more directly through tutoring.
I mean, it's essentially bridging the gap. It's bridging this gap between education and tuition, because there is a gap right now. So how do we help support that? How do we make it work? How do we make it work for the pupils, essentially? And I think those conversations, and I've already started having some of these conversations. I've done a few presentations at different conferences directly towards teachers coming from a tuition perspective, because I want to have these conversations where I say, you know, we can work together. We're not enemies, if you like. We're here for the same purpose, which is the child and benefiting the child and getting the best outcomes for the child. And you know, that's it essentially. And we want to support. And actually, when it works really well, and there are teachers out there that will actually say to parents, I think you need to get a tutor. Like they're quite happy for that to happen, and that's brilliant, you know. And then hopefully, if the dialogue happens where they say specifically what the tutor needs to work on, then it benefits everyone, because, you know, the class learning is a lot easier for the child. They're going to make better progress in school. And that's what we want, really. So, I think it's having these conversations and dialogues with tutors and teachers to change that narrative completely and realise that there is no negative connotations, or shouldn't be, on either side. It's about coming together and working in partnership.
You've been doing this for a while now. How has your definition of success in business changed from when you first started this venture?
I think in the beginning, I was measuring a lot of success by, you know, what money was the business bringing in, what was my turnover, what was my profit, You know, it was very much numbers related, I would say, in the beginning. And that is important, don't get me wrong. But there was also underneath that, what was always a bit of a challenge and a push and a pull is that I come from a teaching background, and that's not how you would ever measure success. So I didn't always sit well with me. I think now I measure it much more by how many fantastic reviews we get, or we get comments from parents or pupils saying the difference that we've made, when we get people coming back to us repeatedly for business, or we get people recommending us all the time, and we've got new parents that come in and say, oh, my friend recommended you, said you were brilliant. You know, that to me is hugely important. And then,
so it's the apple on the desk.
Yeah, absolutely. And also from a kind of employer point of view, the number of times that tutors have maybe left working with me for a period of time, but they come back. You know, I've had a lot of tutors that have gone to have families, or a change of career, or something's changed, you know.
Those things must feel pretty fulfilling when you get the feedback in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it does. It is that light bulb moment. It is that, you know, cherry on the top of the cake, you know, and that is really what matters. It's the whole point of why I run my business. Maybe it's different for a service-based business to a product-based business. You know, I am offering a service, and I really want to give the best service that we can. So when we get that validation back from the parents, but even more so when it comes from the kids, you know, that matters a lot to me. And, you know, yes, I can't operate a business if it was constantly in the red, but, you know, at the same time, I value people's the outcomes we get for everyone.
Well, you raised the subject of money there, in terms of saying that that's less important than it was at the beginning. Yeah. But I think people would be interested to know, how affordable is tutoring?
I mean, it's not. It's not cheap. You know, I think there's different levels, however, out there. You know, you've got some, like I say, it's not a regulated industry. So you might have some people that are doing tuition and don't necessarily have any qualifications, but they could be charging a lot of money for what they're offering. Equally, you could be someone who's got a lot of experience, but maybe they're still class teaching, so they're just doing a bit of tuition on the side. So it's not their main income, so money is not the driver, so they might charge a bit less. At the moment, because there are no regulations, it's hugely varied what you could expect to pay for tuition. And of course, then that creates inequity in itself.
Mm-hmm. So it's an emotionally charged business because it's education. You're dealing with young minds and things like that. Yeah. How do you deal with that side of the business? What do you say to the people who are going, you know, look, this worries me. I'm concerned about it. What's your reaction for that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of reassurance. I mean, I still personally assess every single pupil that we work with, which is a lot. But I want that contact. I want to really know the family. I want to understand what the difficulties are. I've become very good at assessing children and working out things quite quickly. That's my strength, so I kind of go with that. And I have a lot of experience and knowledge in a lot of the things that come up, so I know how to support parents best with that. But you're right, it is emotionally charged. A lot of the time when parents reach out for a tutor, it's the last resort. It's they're really panicked. They don't know what else to do. They know their child is finding things difficult. I mean, it's not always difficult. Sometimes their child is really capable and they don't feel they're being pushed on. But the majority of the time it is because there's difficulties there. And a lot of them feel guilty that they haven't reached out in time. You know, they say, well, I should have come to you sooner. I should have done something sooner.
Well, that's really interesting. You're talking about parents and that lack of knowledge. I'm going to expand this a bit, but what do you wish that parents, or indeed, probably more importantly in the wider scheme of things, policymakers knew about tutoring before they got involved with it?
I think it's the difference that one-on-one support, that time, or even small group support makes. And, you know, in schools, the ability to manage that now and have that time with children is very difficult because we've seen a lot of cuts to support staff, you know, and you need bodies to be able to do that. We've seen a much higher increase in the level of need in schools. So, you know, most of the time teachers are whole class teaching or working with large groups of children, and so the ability to give that really concentrated time just isn't there. So
and there's rightly more demand for that nowadays. As we're in the 21st century, we rightly want to ramp up the standards, so there is going to be more demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for parents, what I would say for them is that, often they will hold back. Or some parents think maybe it's secondary school is a good time to get a tutor. I'll wait till they get to secondary school. I'll wait till it's exams. Often by that point, it's not too late, but you're really having to, work extremely hard to pull it back, because a lot of the time it comes down to a lack of confidence. Children just do not have confidence in their abilities. Confidence is key. One thing I right at the beginning, one of the values that I held on to was, I'm not going to make promises to parents that I cannot keep. I'm not going to be one of these tutors that says, I'll get your child an A, or I'll move them up a year in their reading group in 5 weeks. I can't make those promises, because it's very much about the individual child. It's also about that partnership. To me, it is a partnership. It's the parent, it's the child, and it's us. And we have to all work together to make it work. But the one thing that I feel now, with all the experience, all the time that I've been doing it, is that I can say with quite, a certain amount of, I don't want to use the word confidence, because that's what I'm going to say, but confidence is that we will bring on their confidence. We will make them more self-assured of themselves.
Well, you're backed up by that, because you've been far too modest to tell us about it, but you've won awards for you. Tell us about the awards you've won for doing this without worrying about being modest. Tell us about these things.
We have won quite a few business awards over the years. We've won New Business of the Year, I've won Business Woman of the Year, I've won Thriving Through Challenges, and I can't even think of all the different ones. There's a lot of certificates on the wall, and it's lovely to have those moments.
You can't win those awards unless you're doing things right. So these are, they're important to highlight the quality of work that you're delivering through My Primary and Secondary Tutor.
Yeah, and that just comes all the way back full circle to what I said at the start. Standards and high standards are really important for me. I want to give the best service that we can, and because ultimately that will get the best outcomes for the children, and that's what it's all about. So the awards are wonderful. It's great to be recognised. It's really good sometimes to stop and actually take stock of what you've done and appreciate it, because a lot of the time it just feels like you're on this constant business wheel, and you're in the business all the time, not always on the business. So you need to take that moments. But as much as the awards are important, like I said before, it's also these the reviews, it's the comments, it's the feedback, it's the parents coming back to us time and time again. That's what means more to me. But you're right, it is important to still not ignore that part of it. Looking at your business, really focusing on what you're doing well and celebrating that is really something that all business people should be doing.
We haven't asked Karen. I usually do this much earlier on, but we haven't asked about you and how you deal with the pressures of business. What is it you do to cope with things? How do you take yourself out and give yourself space?
Yeah, it's not easy. I'm not very good at taking time off. I'm a complete workaholic. But I do like going to the gym. So I used to run before, a number of years back. I was running marathons and things like that. But my knees won't cope with it anymore. So I've had to stop that. But I still go to the gym regularly. I need to get a bit of exercise in. And getting out with the kids, walking. My daughter's a runner, but she also likes hill walks. So we're trying to do some of them in rows. So just getting out in fresh air, to be honest. But it's not easy, and I do have to really force myself to make time to do these things. But it's important, because otherwise you're too in it. You can't see the wood for the trees. You have to get some kind of balance. I'm not saying it's ever 50-50. It's never that. But at least having time away is important.
Well, I think if you're going to have a workaholic in business, and most of the people I speak to on this podcast are workaholics, but if you're going to have one, you should have one in the education business, because you're going to get the best possible results from that. Karen Simpson from My Primary and Secondary Tutor and the Tutors Alliance, which I wish you well with. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the Growth for Good podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that was Karen Simpson, founder of My Primary and Secondary Tutor and the Tutors Alliance Scotland. What really struck me in this conversation was Karen's commitment to the standards, partnership and long-term impact. She's not simply built a successful tutoring business, she's working to improve the entire system, raising expectations and creating pathways for greater equity in education. And this is exactly what Growth for Good is about. It's about leaders who look beyond their own success and ask how they can strengthen the communities and sectors they're part of. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share, subscribe to the podcast and follow Growth for Good for more conversations with people who are building businesses with purpose at their core. Thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.